Hello, it is day 0 of Anime Expo Chibi. I am here in Ontario, California. I have a lot of thoughts. Per usual, for every con. It's been a while since I've vlogged, but what kind of con is it if there's no drama in the beginning, right? So it's 6:27 p.m. We've been here since 1 or so, but I had to go back and forth because I needed to pick more things up. We're not even like fully finished putting the display together just because I'm a little rusty and there's just so much to do, and again with the whole drama thing I was kind of drained. But I'll probably rehash everything tomorrow when I am not as biased, because right now I am a little bit pissed off. Slightly pissed off, but also nice seeing everybody since it's been a while. It's good to be at anime cons again. Hello, it is day 1 of AX Chibi. It is 9:51. So because the event does start at 10, but I think they opened it early just because of fire marshal or whatnot, so that kind of makes sense as to why there's a few people just wandering around. So what happened yesterday with like the drama, and I'm not as pissed anymore. Basically, when we arrived, we were promised an 8-foot table as part of the agreement because we did pay like $7.50 for an 8x8 versus a regular 6-foot artist alley table, which is like a few hundred less. And in addition to the $7.50, we did have to pay for event insurance. And when we arrived, there was only a 6-foot table and not an 8-foot table as promised. So obviously we're gonna be irritated because it's not part of the agreement and what we paid for. So luckily, there were a few exhibitor tables that were actually 8 feet that some exhibitors didn't need, so they just put it off to the side, and luckily my sister was able to grab one, so we did manage to get an 8-foot table. However, for a few other people who obviously were traveling from far away or who were not able to come here early enough, some of them had to bring their own table to complete the 8-foot setup, because if you're planning for this event, you're going to plan out your space to fit 8 feet, and obviously it's going to be much more difficult to compromise setup to fit a 6-foot table, especially if you're maxing out on the height limit. So there's that whole thing. I was speaking to one of the Artist Alley staff, or not Artist Alley, but exhibitor staff in general, and his reasoning was that they were given the wrong dimensions for the tent. They weren't able to measure it correctly, and they did have to consider fire marshal because there are specific exits throughout the tent, and obviously you can't block it because it's a safety precaution. I mean, I'm just happy that I got my 8-foot table. Again, I was technically supposed to be on a corner, however, because of the whole moving everything, they did have to move one table next to me, so I'm not exactly on a corner. It's like after coming from night markets and just being badly burnt, and then it's like, oh, you know, gotta deal with this for events, but so we'll see. I am part of 2 stamp rallies, which is really exciting. Hopefully that does increase sales and traffic. I know last year I did do decently well for AX Chibi. However, I did have a really good location at the time. I was more towards the entrance and towards the center. This time we are in the center back because 8x8 spaces are along the perimeter of the tent, whereas regular 6-foot artist alley spaces are in the center. So we'll see. This is the full display. It is definitely my biggest one yet. This is on an 8-foot table, as you can see, and I do have all of my crew necks available. I do have the mirror as well, so let's get a closer look. Or I did put the sign up here, cut it as per usual because we do have to have our sign up just so people know the table location. I do have the holiday cards. Since it is November, it's holiday season, so if anyone wants to get some greeting cards for people, they know where to go. I do have some extra dotted notebooks from Anime Expo that I didn't bring to my night markets. And then I did advertise the one-piece stamp rally. I do have another stamp rally, I just need to get the postcards for those and then just display it there. Ita bags up here. I did put some of the heart Ita bags here. Again, put a place to put my catalog. Bear bag is up here. Initially I was going to have my other cat and bunny corduroy bags up here, however they haven't arrived in time, so just decided to put them up here. I do have these new tote bags, so it's a free shopping bag with a $50 minimum purchase. So that one just premiered this weekend because they just arrived a few days ago. Again, I do have the crew necks. I have them in small, medium, large, XL, 2XL, 3XL. So I'm just gonna mark it off when I don't have those anymore. And then again, I put the prices up so they can easily see it. And then you can see the embroidery, so it's displayed that way. And because I don't have that much space to just display all of the crew necks like that wide. I did fold them up, but you can still see the embroidery on both parts. Pins are up here, stickers on here, and then again, this is the hello. Oh, I love your cosplay. Oh, sorry, it's okay. So this is the mirror that I just premiered for this weekend. So basically, if they want to take a photo, post it in front of the mirror, tag and all that stuff, they do get these free stickers. I don't have these stickers available just because they are, again, online exclusive. So that's it, and that's the entire display. It's 11:15, so it's been about an hour and 15 minutes since this event technically officially started. And honestly, it's been slowly trickling in. It's much slower than last year because I feel like last year it felt like there was a little bit of a rush. However, there was AX staff coming by, and he basically just said that there's a really long line with registration, so I'm assuming people did not get a chance to register yesterday. So they're doing it this morning, which is why there's a lot of people in registration right now, and obviously not a lot of people in exhibitor hall or in artist alley right now. So it's kind of nice because it's not a little stressful, and I was able to warm up with what I'm supposed to say when it comes to like the tote bags or the stamp rallies, just because it is a bit of a mouthful. Not too bad. We have had about 8 sales so far, which is like pretty good for the first hour. And I feel like most of them were decently big purchases. Like someone did buy a B grade Eda bag. There was one instance I did forget to give someone a tote bag. I do remember how they look. I'm all over the place, and I forgot my lanyards, which is really upsetting, unfortunately. However, if I'm gonna forget something, at least it's the lanyards, to be honest. Hopefully today goes well. I did say hi to a few people, which is really nice, since I don't really get to see a lot of them often. So this time we have a mirror, and I tried taping it initially because I know June and Ivy do tape their mirrors up, and they're perfectly fine, and especially that's an outdoor night market, so I feel like it's not as much of a stressful environment here at a con, assuming no one touches the mirror. But I did attach it with this clamp, so hopefully if this decides to fall through, it shouldn't, because this isn't gonna slip through. It's 12:30, so it's been 2 hours and a half since this event started. And again, there's a little bit more people, but there's still a good amount of space in between people where people are just trickling in. And I think right now, I don't know, it's a little bit different because last year they only had 2-day passes, but I feel like a majority of those people did only come in on Saturday because Sunday was definitely not as busy last year. This year, because a lot of people did complain about it, they do have 2-day passes in addition to 1-day passes. So if you only want to go Saturday, or if you want to go Sunday, and so on. I feel like last year most people did purchase within the first few hours. I remember there were lines and crowds at the time. However, now, even if you go throughout this tent area, there isn't a lot of people. So it definitely feels slower this year. It could pick up in a little bit because, again, maybe there was a really long line for registration, so it's just slowly going through, but we'll see. I think I haven't filled a page yet with like my notes, but there were a good amount of people purchasing a lot of items, which is good. So I did give away a few of the tote bags. Again, you would receive a tote bag if you had a minimum purchase of $50, which is nice. Hello. Hello. Good to see you. Look at her Eda bag, is so cute.
They're finally ready.
So ready. Look how cute her display is. She has so much stuff now. It's like a castle. It's 3:12, so probably less than 3 hours until this con ends. To be honest, it definitely started picking up around 1 or 2, so I'm assuming some people went to certain shows or somewhat, or probably just walked around first, and then once they actually did a loop around, that's when they started buying things. But it's kind of hard to tell because it is the holidays, so obviously people are going to spend a little bit more because they are buying gifts for other people or for themselves. However, I did introduce, I don't think I showed it, I did introduce tote bags. So this is the first event that I have them. And it's been a bit of a trend that I've seen within Artist Alley and exhibitors that if you make a minimum purchase of whatever number, in my case, it's like a minimum purchase of $50, you do get a free tote bag. And this one's pretty big because I based the measurements on if it could fit at least 2 Ita bags. And I measured it with like my 2 largest Ita bags, which are my Ita backpacks. So this one's pretty big. I don't know the exact dimensions right now, but this is a front. And then this is a back. It has a bunny and then the bear. And then on the sides, I've seen other people put their QR codes for their socials. I just personally didn't feel like doing that. So I basically use my logo and it says like Mualcaina. And then the bottom, I guess I could have put something there, but I didn't think to do that. So it's just plain. Also, can you tell I'm losing my voice? I did bring hot water because I remember last year it got to the point where I was almost losing my voice because I was talking so much. So I did that this time, even though it's like super hot, but I'm glad I did it. So this is a tote bag, and then I did like how it has like rounded corners. And then I did have like a button to close it. So it's not, you can close it, you have the option to do so. Let me give me a second. Basically what I was saying is that I feel like because there's that minimum purchase amount to get a free tote bag, and it is a pretty good tote bag in my opinion, I think people are more incentivized to purchase a little bit more just to hit that minimum threshold, because there were a few people that were calculating in their mind. I think they wanted to just buy, oh, I'm so sorry. Again, it does incentivize people to purchase more, at least from what I've seen. I also made the tote bag so that you are able to use it outside of a convention setting. But I feel like in terms of sales, I did look at the Square report and I kind of gauged based on how many cash sales we've had. It is pretty decent. It's not like my best Saturday, but it is good enough for me that I would obviously come back. Luckily, there were a few sweater sales. I was hoping to get a little bit more of them, but I think we've sold like 4 sweaters, and then definitely a lot of like Ita bag sales. I kind of was expecting a lot more Nanami spinner pin sales, or even like the regular Nanami pin, but surprisingly, I don't think anyone has purchased the second version of my Nanami pin. But there were a few Nanami spinner pin sales, so that was good. And I think that's also because I know AX Chibi reposted my story that featured the Nanami spinner pin, which I think got people to purchase from my table, so that's good. I think the stamp rally is helping a lot. There were a few stamp cards that were from other tables, so I think that definitely helped in advertising my booth, so to say. But overall, I feel like we're doing a pretty good job. I think within the first 3 or 4 hours or so, that's when we basically broke even on table costs, insurance, and food. But then again, my costs are really low because I do have family nearby, so I'm not really paying for a hotel or whatnot, and this is, I guess, technically considered a local con. I don't really know how it is with Artist Alley with the 6-foot tables. I haven't really had a chance to walk around, so I don't know how busy it is now because I have been stuck in my space for a while. And I will say I don't know how much of an effect it is to get into AX Chibi and then to eventually get into Anime Expo, because I do have AX Chibi friends from last year who did not get into Anime Expo last year, but I would assume that it might help you. But again, I would think that by getting into AX Chibi, there is a possibility of getting into Anime Expo, though not always the case. And I think even getting into AX Chibi, just some information about this event. This is how much the table costs. It is a 2-day event. It's Saturday, Sunday. Typically, it's on Veterans Day weekend, though I'm not sure when it would be next year, but I would assume mid-November to Veterans Day weekend. Not sure about the 6-foot Artist Alley tables, but for the 8x8 Artist Alley tables, as well as for exhibitors, you do have to purchase event insurance. I don't know how much it is individually because I do pay for an annual event insurance. I'll have a link down below with one insurance that is commonly used within Artist Alley. At least for my space, the 8x8 space does come with an 8-foot table, at least if you fight for it or look for one. It comes with 2 chairs. It is an 8x8 space, so it was taped down so you know where your boundaries are. And what's nice is that because no one can come from behind technically, you do have the entire space. However, because it's exactly 8x8, it's kind of hard to get out unless there's gaps between other artist tables. I don't know if this would be worth it if you are flying here. I do have a few friends who did fly here because it is more convenient, especially if you fly into the Ontario airport. since it's literally just right there. You can probably walk it if you're willing to lug your luggage that way, or it's like a very short car ride, probably like a couple minutes. It is kind of like random. I don't know the exact word for it, but you don't know if you'll do well because some people didn't do well, whereas like me and a few friends, I think based on location, we did pretty well last year. This year, it kind of seems like it's on that same trajectory. However, I think it's just nice to be able to at least hit my minimum threshold, or at least my personal minimum threshold, especially after like getting burnt the past few months where I would barely make enough to break even, or at least like just enough to like be satisfied, but like not really. Like anime cons are really just for me, I think, which is also why next year I'm going to do less night markets. I think I signed up for like 1/626 Arcadia and then 1/626 Pleasanton, and then I'm not doing Foodieland just because I feel like it doesn't work well for me. And then I'm just gonna focus on anime cons and then online sales, and hopefully that works out best for me so I'm not burnt out. I will say though, it definitely helps to have your stamp cards as well as the stamp available at your table in display, just because it helps people navigating Artist Alley, and if they're not familiar with how the map is laid out, this definitely helps. In addition to having your sticker sheet, prize, or whatnot available so they can see what they can win if they complete their stamp card. And it's as well as just like pointing out like, oh, during your little spiel, you can point out like, oh, and you'll win this sticker sheet. There's no confusion on that. So this is how the booth looks in the back. I'm gonna try my best because this is a big space. So I did put some sweaters up top here. Some of the bags are here, kind of space everything out. Some of the tarps are here. Some of the stamp rally stuff. I have my sister having her station there for like packing orders. Just some notebooks there, and then the keychains for easy access. I do have my generator there so I can charge my phone if not. Stamp cards. All the pins are here, so I just access them. Some sweaters everywhere. It's kind of messy. And then this is like just a lot more stuff. The bags. It's a lot of stuff. And then some of the suitcases are there, so. It's 4:55, so a little bit more than an hour until this event ends. I think now that I'm looking at least at my Square reports, I don't really know how much I have with cash or with Venmo. I haven't really checked, but just judging based on Square reports, I feel like we're on track to basically either hit the same numbers as last year or just be a little bit under, which I'm not mad about, to be honest. I think I've been rehashing this every time, but as long as I just hit my minimum, I'm fine. I do have a couple more events until the end of the year. My next event is SJ Made Holiday Fest, and then I have LA Comic Con. That one I think I'm mostly doing for fun. I mean, I'm excited for it just because it's a fun event, kind of like paying for the vendor fee and then just making that money back. You're going for business and for fun in a way. And then I'll have at least like several weeks break until I go back for Anime LA and then Anime Impulse LA. You know, you gotta work in order to fund your next Japan trip, which is kind of like my mentality right now since I am, again, just fresh from Japan a few days ago. It's also just really nice being able to see a lot of vendor friends. I feel like this is one of the few events where I do get to see all of them, especially since some of them, if not most of them, aren't even from SoCal or the LA area. And this is one of the few times that you do get to network with other people, and I feel like in this case it isn't necessarily networking, but it's like one of the benefits to actually making genuine vendor friends. I remember when I was watching one of Chris Kaiko's vlogs, he did mention the importance of meeting up with other vendor friends and artist friends who do invite you to go out for dinner like after the con. I feel like a lot of Artist Alley participants tend to be introverted and possibly a little bit shy, so they might not want to do that post-con, especially when you're exhausted. However, I have found so much value. This sounds very business-like, and please believe me that this is just me genuinely making really great and genuine friendships, but there is also, in terms of a business mindset, there's a lot of value with going out with all of these artist friends, especially if they bring their own mutual friends that you haven't met, and then now you're meeting these people that you possibly would not have been able to had you not had another connection with that person. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bigger artist, even if it's just someone who is very specific on that type of merchandise or whatnot, and just really getting to know their perspective on things is just really interesting. Again, don't think about it in an overly like systematic business perspective, because I feel like I really don't like those types of like fake people where they're just after the numbers and the revenue, because at the end of the day, all that really matters is making genuine relationships with other people, and you can only really get that in person. And it also, of course, it helps to be neutrals with other people, but it's also nice being able to actually meet people in person and like actually getting to see their personality and the way they interact with people. Good morning, it is 8:10 in the morning. It is day 2 of AX Chibi. I am a little bit frazzled. Again, I'm not used to doing so many cons at the same, it's not even so many, it's just one con, but it's been a while since I've done a convention. The last one I did was Anime Expo, so looking at yesterday's numbers, it actually was pretty good. It's hard to compare with last year because I don't remember how much I made last Saturday. However, in terms of estimations, I feel like it is projected to be about the same as what I made last year, if not maybe a little bit more. I was talking with a few other artist friends, and they also noticed that there's a lot less people this year, or even if it is their first time, there's a lot of gaps in between the crowd, so to say. And I did see on the Annie Discord that some people who are even closer to the front probably did not make table or were very close to making table, which is not good because Artist Alley tables are lower than the 8x8. It is hard to tell because at the same time I am in the back center, so I'm like nowhere near the entrances or exits. There are certain exit points, but I think they're just for staff, so it's not for attendees at all. And I think what's definitely helping me bring attendees in is because I do have an established following, and I do have a few new items that I premiered this time, like the Nanami spinner pins, the second version of my Nanami pin, Pachita spinner pin, crewneck sweaters, some B-grade Ita bags, so on. There's like I don't know, there's a lot of things, but I don't remember. Personally, I do like AX Chibi. I would definitely do this event again if given the opportunity. I think there are a few things that they need to work on, especially at this location, just because it is technically new, even though I'm assuming it's the same Artist Alley staff as Anime Expo. I know there are a few people who flew in. Some people said that it's worth it for them, while other people are really struggling, so it really is a hit or miss, but I personally think it's worth trying, especially if you are local or at least you had to road trip in my opinion. It's Ashley! Hello! It's like appearing in each other's vlogs finally. It's been a while, I think since Impulse, right?
Yeah,
was it?
Impulse.
Okay.
Yeah.
So good to see you! Bye! It's 11:35, so about an hour and a half since this event started today. The hours are the same as yesterday. It's from 10 to 6. I think we've had about 8 sales so far, which is not too bad for the first hour. I do feel like today is a little bit more slow than yesterday, which is typical for events. Usually Saturday is the most busy because that's when most people have their day off. Again, having spoken with a few other artists and vendors, most people tend to have done better last year. I think because Anime Expo Chibi was sold out last year versus this year, even though they did sell 2-day passes and 1-day passes, I don't think tickets were sold out. There was some excitement last year because it was the first time that Anime Expo was branching off to another event. And I think that because people kind of got a feel of how that event happened or how that event worked last year, kind of didn't really see a lot of things to do at AX Chibi. I feel like AX Chibi did try to branch off in including more voice actors and adding a few more things to do. However, besides the AX name, this event still is pretty small. Even when talking to a few other people who did fly into this event, they also wouldn't recommend vending if you do have to fly. This is definitely more geared towards locals, at least from what I've seen. I'll have to add that in terms of security, there has been a bit of inconsistency. The Ontario Convention Center is notorious for banning food, even though the event itself does allow vendors to bring in food. Personally, we haven't had a problem bringing in our own food, whether that's just a few pieces of bread or our own coffee, and luckily security hasn't made a problem with us. However, I think if you did arrive in later than 8 or so, that's when security tends to be more hesitant in allowing you to bring your own food inside. There were some instances in the past, not necessarily for AX Chibi, but anytime in the Ontario Convention Center, usually security doesn't allow you to bring food for whatever reason, even though there are dietary restrictions and whatnot. Also at this event, for whatever reason, there's a lot of static electricity. I think it's because of the way the flooring is made, so it's pretty common for if you're handing something to someone, you might feel a little bit of static shock. Surprisingly, I've also noticed that there's a lot more inconsistency in upholding certain rules, such as display height. I'm pretty sure the rules for AX Chibi is about the same as Anime Expo, in that your display can't exceed 7.5 feet, and you have to have your products within a certain section and whatnot. But I heard from other artists that they were taking that into consideration, like the first day, like maybe Thursday of setup, but then come Friday and I think and like later on, they just were not enforcing that. So when you walk through Artist Alley, you'll see a few displays that are incredibly tall. Maybe not so dangerous in that you're afraid it's going to fall over. However, it's still very obviously taller than 7.5 feet. So I think they're just not enforcing certain rules versus Anime Expo, which perhaps it's also because it's at a major convention center such as LACC. That one, they are enforcing the rules for the most part nearly every day, if not. So I think they're just a little bit more lenient at this convention. It is 1:58 and a little bit close to 4 hours until this event ends. And honestly, it's a little funny because I was talking to some vendor friends and they were talking about how Exhibitor Hall is incredibly quiet, at least in the entrance or near the entrance exit, because as soon as I stepped in, it kind of felt like you're at a museum and you can hear the squeaking of shoes. You can hear music as you get further into the hall. However, it's a little funny, to be honest. Like, you don't really hear many people talking, but there were a few people there. It's just not as packed, so to say, versus Artist Alley from what I've seen. In terms of sales, it's still pretty slow. I would say it's maybe like 50% of how it felt from yesterday. Again, I feel like every person I've spoken to, they may have done well at Anime Pasadena, so it's kind of interesting because you can think like, did you do better at Anime Pasadena because it was the weekend prior to AX Chibi? Because AX Chibi is about 40 or so minutes away from Pasadena, and you could say that it's pretty much the same attendees for the most part attending both events. So a lot of people who did attend Anime Pasadena probably bought from there, and now they're attending AX Chibi, and most likely they're not going to buy from you again. And I feel like that was the case for me last year. AX Chibi came first, and then Anime Pasadena was the following weekend. I did much better at AX Chibi versus Anime Pasadena. Obviously, I don't have Anime Pasadena as comparison because I did not vend there. I was not in the United States of America. So I'm curious if it's just because one was before the other, or is it because Anime Pasadena is more established? Also, it's very humid in the tent. As soon as I stepped into the tent area where Artist Alley is, it felt very moist and musty compared to Exhibitor Hall, which of course there's air conditioning and it's an actual building. It's just hard to say. I think if I were to kind of consider, do I want to get an 8x8 table again, or would I go back to Artist Alley and get a 6-foot table? I think if I didn't have my sweaters, I possibly would have gone with a 6-foot table. However, I am still heavily considering getting an 8-foot table again. It's just, I didn't really like how it went about, at least in the beginning, with not having an 8-foot table and then having some miscommunication with the layout and so on. But again, this is the second year of AX Chibi. While the organization, and I'm assuming that it's the same as Anime Expo, or they're different groups, I would say that AX Chibi still needs to develop a little bit more for a few more years. However, because I am local, I am willing to go every year versus someone who's not local, someone who is out of state. They would probably have to consider or even reconsider whether they should do AX Chibi next year. It's $4.50. I'm using my tripod as a makeshift tripod. It's technically for my phone, but not for my camera. So this is my sister. She was my helper last year. What are your thoughts on this year versus last year?
I prefer this year because I got to meet everyone, the vendors. They're just like one big family. Everyone is so nice and welcoming, and it just makes everything easier and fun.
Yeah, I feel like this AX Chibi a year ago was the first time that I really got to meet a lot of other vendors in person in a way that we would go out to get dinner together. And I feel like, as I mentioned in previous clips, going out to get dinner with people like outside of a con setting definitely helps you meet a lot of other friends during the process, and it definitely makes doing cons a lot less lonely. And like, everyone's just been nice. I don't think I've ever met anyone who's been mean, to be honest. So even if you're like a first-time vendor, if you're just nice to everyone and just like are willing to talk and say hi to people, I think most often than not, and then especially if you have mutuals, it definitely helps in meeting a lot of other people.
Everyone is just so generous and welcoming.
I think the number of snacks and like little snacks and like chocolates that I've been given, it's just, everyone's just been so nice, and to the point where I was literally talking to her about how, or she said we forgot to eat breakfast and someone gave us, or like Bora gave us bagels, which was like really nice. So there's 20 more minutes until this con ends, and looking at the numbers, it does line up with how much I made last year. And to be honest, I was happy with how much I made last year. And I think it's my fault for having a little bit higher expectations, mostly because I do have bigger items, but overall, it is better than how much I would make at 2-day con. So I know it's not the case for a lot of other people. It definitely was slower than last year, but again, it's, for me, it's not numbers to complain about. But I will be ending this vlog. Hopefully you enjoyed it and found it helpful. Would you do AX Chibi? Would you consider applying, or would you only go as an attendee? Please give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye.